You 2 hours is crazy, right?
I think you'll be. I hope you'll be surprised.
Let's not make this too stupid, okay?
It's gonna be hard for him.
No,
I'm
really.
kidding. I want to ask you about your last couple of years at Disney. Tough period.
I looked at my job as like a manager of a baseball team. These are temporary jobs. Eventually, you're going to fail. I think the hardest moment was dealing with Harvey Weinstein.
Really?
Yeah, because he lied about everything.
You were critical of Disney's decision to suspend Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, I did it with the advice of my wife, who said, don't do it. 3 million people contacted me the next day.
Really?
3 million.
What did you think of Disney's settlement with President Trump?
Well, I didn't like any of that. I thought the CBS settlement was ridiculous.
You negotiated with a couple of Premier League clubs for a little bit, right?
We did. We really were the Wrexham strategy 3 years before Wrexham. Ryan Reynolds got ahead of us.
By the way, I should acknowledge, as we were hearing cars in the background, you very intentionally chose an office a level above the street for a reason, right?
Well, yes. You know Neil Diamond's song, Beautiful Noise, about the cans and the garbage cans and the noise and how it gets him to sleep and so forth. I grew up on the 3rd floor in Manhattan. The street I'm on here is maybe the only street that I can think of that is like New York. There's 17 restaurants and coffee shops and everything on the street. You can walk to your dentist, you can walk to your doctor, you can walk to stores. You don't have to drive except to get here, and it's not that far from where I live. And everybody, I took this office. There's a high school. If you stick around till the end of the day, they're all screaming and walking up and down. Every fire engine goes by. I can go right to sleep. That to me is the most comfortable, is hearing that sound. When I moved here and it was quiet in our house, I thought it was a little strange. So I have intentionally come to where everybody can, we don't have a commissary, but everybody can go and stay on the street. Nobody has to drive anywhere. And it's much more productive than being in some high rise in Century City or being in Burbank, being with a studio lot. I did try to buy the Culver studio and didn't, which was stupid because then Amazon came in and spent a fortune. But that's why I'm here. So hearing the noise, I don't even hear it.
So we were with you last week at Portsmouth. How did it go?
In Portsmouth, it went great. I'm there not just to see a game, I'm there to talk about all the players, and also all the capital X, the investment in the training ground, in the changing rooms, in Fratton Park. But the game itself, we played well. They were very aggressive. Unfortunately, it was a draw. We played terribly the week before. And we just came alive. Fratton Park, which is the stadium this historic stadium, is just a fantastic place. You're close to the pitch. We renovated it.
Now, preceding you buying Portsmouth, I know you scouted teams for a while with your wife, sister, one of your sons. What was involved with that?
Well, I figured having, been involved with ESPN, buying Capital Cities ABC, having the Los Angeles Angels, the Mighty Ducks, we started. I knew how important sports was to broadcasters, to everybody. The NFL, I think, is 97% the #1 show that week. You can't buy a league, but you could get involved with the team. And I liked the idea. The Mighty Ducks was, from our movies that we made, it was a silly name. People mocked us, and they didn't when we won the Stanley Cup.
Well, and for a while, you guys were I think, making up 80% of the NHL's merchandise sales.
We did well. It was a new franchise, and the Angels, the previous owner, Gene Autry, had never won the World Series, and we did it with scrappy young players. But anyway, I thought a great asset and fun asset in the family that plays together, stays together. I thought it'd be great for my family. And we looked all over the world. We first looked at MLS here. It seemed overpriced to me at the time. We looked at teams in Europe. It seemed like the only real center of soccer, football, as it were, was the UK. We looked at teams in the UK.
You negotiated with a couple Premier League clubs for a little bit, right?
We did, but in the end of the day, I just wanted to build from scratch. We really were the Wrexham strategy 3 years before Wrexham. And I thought, geez, I didn't want to be in England and be Hollywood, and we would just concentrate on sports. Ryan Reynolds got ahead of us smartly and went to Northern Wales. We went to Southern England, and we're building a team up from scratch. And we're patient. When I went to Disney, the idea of the family playing together stays together. We made a commercial in my first couple months with a family around a breakfast table and 3 kids, one in an infant chair, and they're rushing to get ready, and the father runs off, the mother runs off to their jobs, the kids run off to school, and they leave the kid sitting there alone. And then the thing is, the family that plays together stays together. They all run back, having forgotten this kid. And the next shot is them at Walt Disney World. We took a lot of grief because some people in the population thought we were actually considering leaving a kid alone in a kitchen, but it set the standard of the idea of family together having a good time.
And Disney at that point hadn't really done any marketing, and this was a huge, hugely successful
This was the
ad
beginning.
campaign.
This was the beginning of us really pushing. Well, we also made a deal. They hadn't made a movie in a long time that you could make a ride out of it. So we made a deal with George Lucas for Star Wars, for Raiders of the Lost Ark. We made a commercial that my wife hinted to me at a dinner about now that you've won the Super Bowl, or now that you've achieved your greatest goals, what are you going to do next? And we would say at that moment, I'm going to Disney World, or I'm going to Disneyland, which had a little trouble with Warner Brothers because they tried to steal it for a movie coming up. And we were able to convince them not to do that. And that became quite an important piece of our marketing.
I want to go back to Portsmouth momentarily before moving on. Take me to May of 2017, Portsmouth Guildhall, and the pitch that you kind of had to give.
Well, we had gone all over, and most of the places were for sale or they were interested. Portsmouth really wasn't, but we learned that it was owned by the fans, and the CEO, not the board, was kind of interested in us, and he said, come on down, and we got in his car, and we got there, and we drove around, and Eric, my son, said to me, Dad, this is it, now or never. How much more are we going to fly all over the world looking for a team? And then we went to the game, the match, and it really was like the Final Four in the US, but every game is like that. And I'm sure if you were there photographing it, you would get that sense. It's just an unbelievable feeling. The pitch is close to the fans. It's an island city in England. They have a long history, 1890s. They've been in the Premier League. They had 3 owners that went broke. big history there. It's a naval city. Henry VIII left from there, watched a ship go down off the coast, D-Day from there. So it's the second most bombed city outside of London because of the Navy during the Second World War. There's so much history. They're so passionate. Very working class city.
What were some of the issues you recognized upon taking over, and how have you gone about trying to resolve those?
Well, it was attractive because there was no value, so we were able to get in there. I didn't realize how much we'd have to spend in bringing it back, but it was what I like. It's looking for something to, instead of buying up here, buying down here, and then getting it up there.
And you spent way more bringing it back than you did on purchasing the actual team.
By multiples, yes. Yeah, we did. And we did a lot of due diligence, and we were underestimating. We had to build a whole new stand, sprinkler systems, exits, get rid of safe standing. Food was awful, everything,
Because there were, I think, 18,000 people can go to a game, but at the time, because of some of the issues with the stands, they were thinking that could have to be reduced to 10,000.
Yeah, every year it got reduced because of the safety issues. But it was more than that. It was bringing it back, making a fan zone, which we did, which I think I walked in and they saw me walk in. That was brand new. We're still working on things that I learned at Disney. And
Like what?
Well, we had when the fans were running it, the management was doing great, but I had them come up and go to the Disney University to learn the obvious, which is how to take care of the public. And we've worked on that. We've worked on everything to do with dealing with the public. And of course, we've improved the squad.
How do things stand today with the team and kind of the revitalization of it relative to where you were expecting it would be at this point?
Well, I didn't expect to win the World Series for the Angels. I didn't expect to get in the Stanley Cup for the Ducks. Nobody expected that. We've been at it for 7 or 8 years. The pyramid in English football, the pyramid starts with a Premier League with 20 teams, and then there's 72 teams in the EFL below the pyramid. And we're now in the league just below the Premier League, the championship. It's very exciting and very expensive. Everybody loses money. Parliament has made a law with an administrator who's going to adjudicate how the money gets determined. Right now, the Premier League in the media takes 96% of the revenue for 20 teams, and 4% goes to the other 72 teams, which means the other 72 teams are all losing money and going broke, except for the ones that are owned by super billionaires and Eastern monarchs and things like that. So the economics are very difficult, but they'll get better.
How have you gone about figuring out the roles your family plays in all of it?
Well, my kids are deferential to me. I wish they weren't.
Really?
But, well, I'm not 25 years old. They're going to have to take it over. And my son in New York, because it's closer, Eric, is much more involved with the team. But my other two sons are involved, but we're, 6,000 miles away. We do Zoom calls all the time. They're interested, but when it comes to the finances, it's difficult. They actually own the team. The three of them own the team. And I've done that from the beginning. I loaned them the money to pay for the deficit. It's a mess. It's complicated financially. But I think we'll come out of this tunnel into the bright lights of not only being in the Premier League, but being sustainable. And that's a word used meaning you don't lose money.
So speaking of family, and you alluded to grandparents when I was talking to you and your wife earlier. I want to take you way back and talk a little bit about family. But first, explain who your maternal grandfather, Milton, was.
Well, he was my maternal grandfather. He came from Washington, D.C., poor. I don't know how poor. He said he was poor. I don't know how poor he was, but he was certainly worked his way through Georgetown Law School, and eventually was the CEO and not the founder, but I'm not exactly sure, but they invented the safety razor, avoid the 5 o'clock shadow. And I used to go to Yankee Stadium with him, and he had a little, they didn't have boxes, but they had a little section that was cordoned off, and he'd not watch the game, Mickey Mantle, etc. And he'd point out to right field, to the Gem, their company, ad. Say that, Michael, look at the ad, look at Gem, avoid this 5 o'clock shadow. So he was very proud that he had worked his way up to actually having a ad in right field for Gem Razor Company.
What do you remember from Cedar Knoll Farm?
Well, he was self-made, and he had a farm hour outside of Bedford Hills, outside of New York and Bedford Hills, and we lived in a building, a house on the back of it, in the summers and in weekends, and I don't even know how you know the name Cedar Knoll Farm, but that was the name. And my first car was a hand-me-down, which I took to college, and had Cedar Knoll Farm written on the side. So that was my grandfather's property.
One of the things that I found remarkable about you as part of preparing for it is, you grew up well off. There are so many people that grow up well off and make very little of themselves. What do you think it was about your upbringing that instilled hard work and didn't kind of dampen motivation?
Well, everybody has some wrong idea of this. There are 350 million people in the country. There's a very small number of people that are brought up well off, comparatively speaking. So most of the people that make it are in the 350 million people that are not well off.
Right.
And the same percentage, maybe, of people that are well off make it, but it's a much tinier number. So everybody figures that if you're well off, you're going to be sitting by a swimming pool, drinking a margarita, and being a cast off.
Yeah, but I grew up with a lot of those folks. They just kind of coast along, do enough to get by.
There are a lot of people there are a lot of people, the majority on both sides, that just coast by. Mm-hmm. It is the unique, whether it's environmental, family, IQ, emotional aggressiveness, picking the right spouse, all of those things go into it. But the people that say to me, how did you make it? Because a lot of people who had a wealthy family never bothered to work. And I said, well, I just don't find that true. I know a lot of people that I grew up with are doing very, very well.
Although that is a conversation I'll have often with folks that we profiled who were, first generation wealthy, because they're then parents and they have unlimited resource, the ability to create whatever opportunities they want for their children, and what the balance is between that and dampening motivation.
You just don't know. You don't know if you have a child that you've worked with and ends up at Harvard and Yale Law School and then fails, and then you have another child who may be on the spectrum or has a learning difficulty and ends up Elon Musk. You just don't know. You don't know if somebody who comes from the Kennedy family or the Rockefeller family becomes a governor and the president, or somebody from a family of immigrants, first generation of immigrants. So it's just not the cliche.
For every hour that you wanted to watch TV growing up, you had to read for 2 hours.
I did, but I found a way to cheat on that. But in any event, everybody, there's a different story in every family. It's obviously better to have a family that has a mother and father, that has an image of what a mother is, what a father is, what masculinity is. It is always better to have a family that encourages, like a lot of immigrant families, education, starting at the bottom, not being afraid. Like a lot of wealthy people, well, I can't start in the mailroom. I gotta start as a vice president, that kind of attitude. All of that stuff I've heard my whole life in various different places. And there is no answer to that. It's obviously better to have a solid family. A single mother in the ghetto is not good for her children. No question about that. That doesn't mean every single mother who has a child in the ghetto, that child can't be president of the United States.
What do you think you learned from your mom?
How to put up with my father.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you learn a lot from your relationship with your parents. My father always said to me, never tell your mother a secret. Trust me, she's married to me. I'm going to find out everything you say to her. So don't tell her anything you don't want me to hear. So I learned that. He also said to me, or she said to me, one I can't remember, I just say yes. No matter how angry he gets, whatever, I say yes. And then an hour later, I do what I want to do.
In what ways was she more ambitious and goal-oriented than your dad?
Well, if she had been a contemporary mother, she'd run General Motors. But
what makes you say that?
Because she just was very organized and very smart and had a lot of aggression. Just in her era, that was pretty much impossible. And she didn't want to do that. She wanted to be supportive of, what you learn by going to the movies, in those days.
Your father, Lester, was away at war the first few years of your life, flying transport planes in the Air Force. How do you think that impacted your family?
I was pretty young. I do know that he started an airline in Ecuador. I do know that he bought 2 DC-3s for $20,000, $10,000 each to start this airline. I do know that he loaned $10,000 to this guy, Tony Blauner, haven't thought of that name in 70 years, as his partner. I do know that my mother was not wild being in Ecuador. And I do know that we were thrown out of Ecuador during a revolution and we lost the 2 planes and he never got paid back the $10,000. And I do know that it was cheaper for Ecuadorians to fly to Quito inside the plane if they were dead. So they would be flying dead people in seats because it was cheaper than going in a coffin. I do remember that.
I don't know if this is correct or not, but I read he was never quite comfortable in the fatherly type role.
No, that's not true. You may know that because I called him by his first name. Because my sister who's older could never, he said, pronounce daddy or dad right. So we called him by his first name. So all my friends thought he was my stepfather, but he wasn't. He was my father. But I don't think he wanted to get older. I don't think he was a Peter Pan character, but we did call him by his first name.
You mentioned his mom's passing. How do you think that kind of influenced his life?
I think if you're 10 years old and your mother dies, your life is forever influenced. I don't know the answer. I was his son. I wasn't his, but I know they were married 50 years and they were close to both their sides, their parents. And most people that write memoirs or do these interviews will tell you that they were beaten, they were thrown out the window, they were never given the right amount of food, they were ignored. I don't know. I didn't have that. I'm sorry that I can't make it more theatrical.
I wasn't looking for that. You wrote a wonderful book about camp, obviously, and the impact it had on your life. You went to camp in some way, shape, or form till you were, I think, 22. But tell about this boxing match he set up for you when you were 7 years old.
he was one of those fathers that wanted his son to be older than he was from the day he was born. He was a polo player. He had me riding in Central Park when I was 6 years old. He had me leaving the barn in Westchester and galloping until the horses were soaking wet for 1 straight hour. I'd fall off, I'd get back on. He wanted me to do everything age inappropriate. Could have waited a couple years. So we went up I started the camp at 8. We went up at 7 to see it with him, father-son thing. And we went to the camp and they put me in the young group overnight, which I was even younger than. And they had me, my father had me and the head of the camp had me boxing, which now they don't even do at the camp anymore, as a visitor with some kid that was 6 feet 4, 400 pounds. I think he probably thought that was a bad idea. If my mother was there, that wouldn't have happened.
You said one of the biggest areas of conflict in your life was trying to meet your father's expectations.
Yeah, he would have liked his son to have straight A's, to always have his homework done, to be the captain of the football team, and all of that. I was some of that, but not all of that. I mean, I was pretty independent. I mean, I can remember going to Father's Day at my grade school, having not done my homework. How stupid is that? And when I was called to the board to do something in math, I didn't even know what they were talking about. He was not thrilled with that.
You were originally going to be pre-med, later majored in English. He was kind of disappointed that you chose to go to Denison.
No, not, well, yes and no. I mean, they all went to Princeton, and I went to a school called Lawrenceville, which was down the road from Princeton.
Toughest place you've ever been? By
far. All boys, schools through Saturday, chapel every day. But I did it. I did it 4 years. But one day, somebody walked past me with a brochure from Denison, which I never heard of. And there was this beautiful blonde Doris Day looking girl on the cover, beautiful chapel in the background. This is in February. I hadn't applied. And you had to have the minister's report. It was a Baptist college. Didn't dissuade me. I got the headmaster of the school, who was a minister. He filled it out. I got in. I told my father in June. Was not thrilled. We drove out. We get to the front gate. It's a beautiful school. It did say on the front gate, Christian school for men and women. Women was the key. My father looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know. It seemed like a good place to go."
And he'd already vetoed California for college.
He had vetoed mostly Japan, because he lost a brother in World War II in Japan. He vetoed California because it was too expensive to fly out. He loved Denison. I think they picked the women by their looks. It was heaven. I never had him. It was great. It was great. It was 2,000 students, not 25,000 students. I could write plays, have them produced, stuff like that.
Speaking of writing plays, why did your Paris apartment smell like urine?
Well, after I graduated from Denison, I went to Europe to write the great American novel, Following whatever. And I went with a friend, and we found a place in the left bank. We had a budget, and we had a little bedroom, tiny, and the wall opposite where the headboard was the men's bathroom. So every time the toilet flushed, you knew it had happened. So it smelled. And I noticed that all the Americans were kind of running away. It seemed unhealthy. One of them jumped out of the steeple of Notre Dame, committed suicide, and I thought, you know what, this is a stupid idea. And I got on a plane and came home and got a job at NBC.
Tell about To Stop a River.
It was originally called To Metastasize a River. You want to talk about not understanding what that word meant. Well, I was at Denison. I was a pre-med. I finally became a theater major and an English major because I didn't like organic chemistry. And I liked the theater. And there was a girl who would not date me, who was in the theater, was the big college star. So I wrote a play for her, which was called, I eventually called it To Stop a River. She still wouldn't date me. Well, she dated me once, but she wouldn't date me. So I wrote a play, and then I wrote some more. And
how well do you recall the rejections in the attempts to sell the play?
Well, the play got a very good review in the Newark, Ohio Advocate, I think. I can't remember the name of the thing. I wrote it. I was bored with what I wrote. I didn't like rewriting it. I saw it on opening night, and I never went back again. I thought it was too dull. But then I wrote another play. But I think on that play, my father knew an agent at William Morris. And I sent, my father's secretary typed it for me, and I sent it to him. And I sensed that he liked it. I think he told me he liked it, but he died the next day. And then when I went back to William Morris to say, hey, this guy died, somebody else read the play, nobody else ever read it. So that was the end of the play. It was very sophomoric. My wife still has not read it. She has not read, I wrote 3 plays in about 3 weeks. She hasn't read any of them, and we decided she would read them at my 25th anniversary, then my 35th anniversary, then at my 50th anniversary. She still hasn't read them. I have them in boxes somewhere.
You said before, patience is almost always rewarded in the entertainment business. How so?
Well, I am not patient, so it's something you have to learn. And we do a show called BoJack Horseman. A big hit, great show. Somebody said to me, there's a person that works on a writer's room at a CBS mediocre show. We met him down the hall, and he told my associate his 3 ideas, and I said to him, you got 2 minutes, which one of those 3 do you want me to hear? And he told me about BoJack Horseman. And since I liked, what was the show, the talking horse, anyway, some show of my youth. I thought, oh, this would be fun to do, go write that. He wrote it, it came back, it was fantastic. Fantastic. This is Raphael Bob Waxberg, who also has Long Story Short now, just now on Netflix. And, but we couldn't, I'm the only one of the people here thought it was great. So then we decided we would make it ourselves. And we made a 12-minute version of it. And luckily, there was one guy, because everybody else passed, one guy at Netflix that loved it. And it got ordered. And it's become probably their best reviewed show. So patience, which is your question, if we didn't have patience, which I don't have, which I forced myself to have, nothing would ever happen. Because all it takes, if you have 10 people in a room and one person is negative at a buyer, it fails. So you have to keep pushing and trying, and we have, I don't know, 20 shows in development, and we keep pushing and so forth. When I was a buyer, I'd like to think that I wasn't that way. If somebody came in with an idea I liked, this is before streaming, I'd just say yes. And there were only 3 networks or 4 networks. So I had, I just said yes to, 15 different shows, which is why I succeeded, because I was lucky I picked the right ones.
Bob Iger once said, you said, micromanaging is underrated. How so?
Well, I was criticized for being a micromanager, and I would say, well, why hire me? And you can't micromanage when you have 100,000 employees. That's ridiculous. But I was a micromanager in the sense that everything that had to do with taste, whether it was a theme park ride or a new theme park, or the schedule at ABC, or architecture particularly, I produced basically the first Broadway show we did because nobody wanted to do it. And the CEO producing a Broadway show is kind of weird. So that was why I was criticized for being a micromanager. And my point is, the CEO should be a micromanager, but you can't really be a micromanager. You have to pick your spots.
Your longtime friend, Barry Diller, he once said about you, he's paranoid. Michael is very suspicious of motives. What do you think the genesis is of that?
Well, it's very competitive in the executive world. He and I are within a month of each other of age, and several months of each other of joining ABC. I wouldn't say we were competitive because he worked for a more important person than I did. Then I worked for a more important person than he did. And for the rest of my career, he was at a higher level than I was until I went to Disney. And he said to me, this is where it comes from. He said to me, after Charlie Bluedhorn, who was the chairman of Gulf and Western, who we all loved, was replaced by Marty Davis, when Marty died, and I heard it, I called Barry, he was in his car, and Barry's comment was, I hope it was painful. So nobody liked this guy. And Barry said to me one day that Marty wanted me fired. And I said, well, that's not possible. We have 5 shows in the top 10. We've been the #1 movie studio for 7 years in a row.
You guys turned Paramount around.
We were doing well.
And that's a very conservative understatement.
Yeah, but I don't understand why he would want me fired. I think I learned later that he didn't like the fact that Barry and I shared half of the bonus pool. I don't know. And Barry said, he said to Marty, I'm not going to fire him, and if you make me fire him, I'm quitting too. And I really didn't believe Barry. I mean, I did and I didn't. I thought, I didn't know what was going on. It turned out to be totally true. Not only did he quit, he went to Fox, wanted me to go with him to Fox. And I got a call from Roy Disney, do you have a contract? I said no, I hadn't left Paramount yet. And the week after I left Paramount, I joined Disney. So I've, you know, one thing, it's good to be lucky. That's another thing. You got to take advantage of it, but you got to be good to be. It's good to be lucky.
But hard work creates luck.
Yes, and you're not lucky if you're a dope, but you got to be lucky.
Okay, so Barry also said, the only argument I've ever had with Michael is that he's an inch too tough. 85% of his toughness is for good reasons. 15% is over the line. Your thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, I worked extremely well with him. He's much smarter than me and most everybody else.
You guys kind of both pushed each other in a way,
Yeah,
like in the best way possible.
Yes, and I would fight is the wrong word. I would argue with him on a movie I'd want to make, he'd argue with a movie that he wanted to make, we'd come to an agreement. I don't think we ever had an argument that didn't result in something good, and we never had an argument in front of anybody or anything like that.
And you guys almost respected each other more than anybody else.
Yeah, and the thing about Barry is, which I learned early, he never lied to me, including the story I just told. If we made a deal and we agreed on this, and we didn't like the deal, we stuck with the deal. Our word in this business is very important, and we kept our word, and we worked great together. And I worked great with him at ABC, and I worked great with him at Paramount. I was the heavy in a lot of cases. He knew exactly what I was doing and how tough I was. I would say he's tougher than I am.
Really?
But I carried the water in those era.
Why were you the only Hollywood exec to never get invited to Swifty's Oscar party?
Oh my God. I would not let Bob Redford direct Ordinary People, but for the same kind of deal that we would give any first-time director. He was making millions as an actor, and I said, you have to work for scale, first-time director. And Barry said, how can you ask this man to work for, I said, because we ask everybody. But on Swifty, so he had a book, and I can't what the book was, and then I found out he was going to be the producer. And I thought that was a conflict of interest, and I said, no, you're either the agent or you're the producer, you can't be both. And he went to Barry and complained. So Barry said to him, I have to back the president, I can't. So I was bringing television ethics, because television in those days was all the networks, and the networks were licensed by government. And if you screwed around with the government, it didn't end up well. The movie business was, oh my God, and all for one, it's just wild. And Barry and I were the first television people ever to go into the movie business. It was then followed by Warner Brothers and everybody else. We were the first. And we got there early in the morning, we worked hard, we wore a suit, we didn't play cards through lunch, and I wouldn't do deals that had conflicts in them.
How about the lengths to which you went to at summer camp when Larry Gordon was walking towards you?
Well, he and I have a different version of this. I supported him for decades, and when he asked me to direct a film, I thought that was a great idea, because I think he's talented. I'm actually doing a show now with him, so we've made up. But I said to him, you have to work for scale. Bob Redford worked for scale. You have to work for scale. Instead of which he went and made a deal at Universal. So I took all of his furniture and put it out on Melrose Avenue and threw him off the lot. And then he went to a judge and sued us and won. So for the next 2 years, he was still back on the lot. And my wife wrote a television series with his wife. My kids went to school with his kids. They went to the camp with his kids. And he kept trying to make up, and I wouldn't make up. I was too upset. And at camp one day, he walked out on the dock to try to schmooze me, and I dove in with all my clothes and swam away. So we did have a little conflict.
What did Jane say to you after that?
Oh, then I decided to write a script, not me writing it. So I commissioned a script called Worst Friends about lawyers. And one lawyer was ethical and honest and straightforward, and the other was a little bit of an angle player. I was the lawyer that was honest. I was going to have Redford play me, and I was going to have Danny DeVito play Larry. And I was moving, I didn't have either of them. I haven't talked to anybody. And she said, Michael, you got to stop. You can't keep doing this. So I didn't go any further. Script is pretty good.
You've crossed paths with obviously so many folks over the years and from so many different eras. We came up with a list of a mile long of folks I wanted to ask you about, but we've narrowed it down to just a handful. And I'm curious, just starting kind of in the media world, John Malone. You once said you didn't really feel comfortable with him, and you kind of self-protectively kept your distance. Why?
I didn't understand a word he said. He's the smartest man in the entertainment business. Every one of his deals is very complicated, tax-oriented, and I just knew I was over my head. Barry did deal with him, and Barry, Expedia and IAC and other things did very well with him. Everybody else, he's the only one. I think I'm not the only, I don't think I'm alone in finding him brilliant, because he always ends up with fantastic deals. The nicest man in the world. By the way, I have a very pleasant relationship with him. but I'm not going to negotiate against him.
How about most interesting time you ever had with Rupert Murdoch?
I never really was in business with Rupert. Oh, yeah, I had one bad thing with him. Yeah, but he was a competitor. He was at Fox. He bought Sky Television and he wanted all our movies. And I wouldn't sell him our movies for what he was asking. But I said I would sell him if he sold us half of Sky. So he agreed. So we owned half of Sky, but he had the management control. And we could never find out what was going on, except for losing money in that era. So eventually, I asked Barry if he could set up a meeting with Rupert. So we had a meeting at Paramount, and we had lunch with them, Barry, Rupert, and us and them. And we started. He turned his chair facing away from the round table, never said a word in the entire meeting. Not a word. Then he sued us, so we sued him. And I met him at the Mayfair Hotel in New York 6 months later. And I settled the lawsuit with him in 5 minutes.
How does that happen?
I wanted out. He wanted 100%. I said, you have to buy the movies. He said, yes. And that was that.
Steven Spielberg and George Lucas bring you Raiders of the Lost Ark. What do you recall from the first time you went to see Lucas on his ranch?
Well, everybody had passed on Raiders because the scene opening Raiders with a ball looked like it would have cost as much as any movie ever made, just that scene. And I thought the script was fantastic. And we made the deal, and I went to meet Steven and George and tell them we have a $17 million budget. And you got to bring it in at that. Today, it would cost, $200 million. And Steven said, I can do a budget at any price. And he said, we'll take the scene when the plane goes to Malaysia, wherever it was going, over the Pacific. He said, if you want, I can build a plane, I can get a plane, I can do it on the plane, I can go there. Or I think what I'll do is I'll just have a little piece of the end of the wing and a door, and Harrison Ford will walk through the door, the engines will start, you'll hear a plane take off, and the next thing they'll do is there'll be a map showing going across the Pacific. And I said, well, fine. And that scene is in the movie. And he did the movie on budget. And history was made. And I've talked to Steven about, there was some movie that he wanted to do with only, the whole thing was going to be from one camera. And it was all going to be about somebody like $6 Million Man who was stuck on a bed, and everything in the movie was from his point of view. It was a very good script. I could not understand how you could have one camera. And he explained how he would do it. And he made it seem so simple. There's nobody like him.
What was Harvey Weinstein like to work with?
Horrible.
How so?
He was just a pig. He was rude, but he was a closet intellectual. He looked like a truck driver. He acted like a truck driver. He had great independent film taste. And nobody at Disney would deal with him but me. And he just couldn't tell the truth. He didn't stick to the contracts. But he made Shakespeare in Love and all these great movies, and we bought the company. We did not have a small movie division. We bought the company for $70 million. But he turned into wanting to make $100 million movies. He
brought you Lord of the Rings, didn't he?
He did bring me Lord of the Rings, and I passed on Lord of the Rings, stupidly, because the budget was so astronomical, and I just didn't think he was I was wrong.
Yeah, but the reality is nobody bets 1,000, and you were right more than you were wrong, which is why you've had all the success you've had.
I could tell you the four things I passed on that became big hits, but mostly we were right.
Wait, what were they? I'm curious.
I know.
Okay.
Private Benjamin, I didn't pass on it, but I didn't like the third act. I asked
Goldie Hawn.
Yeah, I asked. Well, first I thought Goldie Hawn looked heavy, and I told it to her agent, and he said, "Why doesn't she come in and talk to you?" She came in and talked to me, and the first thing she said is, "You know, I was pregnant." Or no, I just had the baby or something. So I did not like the third act. And they went and sold it to Columbia. It didn't matter. Goldie Hawn in a uniform, you didn't even need a third act. So I was wrong about that. I can't remember what the others were.
What interactions did you have with Johnny Carson over the years?
Not much. He was on, not on ABC.
Right.
I saw him. He was telling me how it's interesting in today's world that why does he not support a political party more? He says, 50% of the country is one way and 50% is the other. Why should I have a show that only goes to 50% of the country? Which is a good piece of, and that's the way Disney was. We supported both equally Democrats and Republicans. We want everybody to go to Disneyland. We don't just want Republicans or whatever. But today, I think too many, even though I'm the one that was the first one out to support Jimmy Kimmel, I think it probably would have been better if he went after Democrats as well as going after Republicans. And maybe he does, but
because broadens your audience, doesn't get people that disagree with you to turn off.
If you're going to be an entertainer, you want everybody. Mm-hmm. And you can certainly be critical and have an edge, but you got to be that way to everybody.
Warren Buffett, that obviously instrumental in your deal to acquire Capital Cities ABC. What you recall from the kind of chance encounter you guys had that led to what was one of the biggest, the first or second biggest acquisition in corporate history at the time?
That was the biggest, and I knew him. I would go to his conference, his investor meeting, and I knew ABC, having worked there for 10 years, very well. And at one point we were going to buy them very early, before Capital Cities. Capital Cities bought them. A year before we did buy them, I had a conversation and wouldn't step up to what they wanted. And let's see, how did this work? I was at Sun Valley. I was walking through the parking lot, and I saw first Larry Tisch in the parking lot. And he said, "Why don't you buy CBS?" And we didn't really want to buy CBS. They didn't have ESPN. But I don't know. Let me think about it.
Yeah.
And then I bumped into Warren, and I said, "Larry Tisch just offered me the company." And he said, "Why don't you buy ABC?" And I said, "Okay." And he was playing golf with Tom Murphy, who was 5 cars away or 10 cars away. He'd come over, Tom, and Michael wants to buy Capital Cities and ABC. I think we should sell it. Tom said, "Let me think about it." And Warren said, No, what do you think? He said, I think he said $18 a share. I can't remember exactly. Okay, I'll sell it to over $18 a share. And then I went and told our CFO. I went back to here. I called him up and said, and I'm making this up because I can't remember, $17.50 or something. He said, "No, Michael, it's 18, and you did this to me a year ago, because I did the same thing. So I said, okay. And I got in the plane, picked Sid Bass, our largest shareholder, up, went to New York, and announced the deal closed on Good Morning America on Monday. 3 days, no due diligence. And then Tom told me he sold it way too cheap, which he did, because ESPN was just exploding.
And you and Warren spent quite a bit of time together over the years. And you and Jane would have dinner, I think, with Warren and Susie.
We did, but he was, when we announced it, there's nobody like this guy. We all announced that Warren was there, and he became our largest shareholder. And I said to him, after the ceremony right there, I hope you continue being a largest shareholder. He said, I never make a decision to sell and buy the same thing on the same day. And I knew right then he was not going to hold it.
Really?
Yeah. Anybody says to you, I never make the same decision, he did sell and buy on the same day. And within 6 months he sold, which he regrets.
Understandably so, with how you grew the company. Last one for you, Steve Jobs. In what ways could he be difficult?
Well, he was clearly one of the most creative people ever in understanding simplicity and marketing and enough technology to be, in the best way, dangerous. He did not really know about Pixar. They bought Pixar from George Lucas for the technology and made a film called Toy Story, because for us, we encouraged it because we thought their technology could revolutionize the whole idea of computer-generated animation. And because it was, and this is maybe what Barry's referring to, because it was our idea, I wouldn't say the movie was our idea, but the whole idea of making it was our idea. And we went through a lot of cuts of it and so forth, and it became a big hit. But because it was a first time, I go back to the first time, a first time production of this company, they were on a net deal, and to simplify it, we owned probably 85 or 90% of the film. And then we made a second film where we did the same thing. And then Steve came to me, and I may have all this, somebody can correct me. He wanted to change the deal. And he was agreed that he'd put up half the money. And I said, fine, and we made a new 3-picture deal. And I said, of course, we have to have a distribution fee. And he wasn't as knowledgeable of the business at that point as I was, and he agreed to a hefty distribution deal. So we got a big piece off the top. So instead of 50-50, it was more like 70% ours or something, which really drove him crazy. And I wouldn't change it.
How about the toughest conversation the two of you ever had?
I don't think we had tough conversations. I just wouldn't do it. And he then said he wouldn't make a new deal. And I became stubborn and decided to make Toy Story 3 ourselves. And Bob Iger was a lot smarter than I was.
How so?
Because we owned all the films, and he wanted an amount of money to pay for something that we already owned. And I thought, we own it. Why? Bob wanted peace and wanted a new deal and wanted the creativity of them to be part of Disney, because our creativity was not as what it was. And he paid up for it, which turned out to be the right thing to do.
Bob Iger has made the comment before that if Steve Jobs was still running Apple, he thinks the Walt Disney Company and Apple would have combined somehow. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I doubt I would have wanted to do that, but maybe.
You mentioned this a moment ago. You were critical of Disney's decision to suspend Jimmy Kimmel. What made you decide to come out and kind of vocalize that?
Well, I did it with the advice of my wife, who said, don't do it. I did it with the advice of Matt Traub, who's around here somewhere, who said, you're playing with fire. The only person that wanted me to do it was Breck, who's around somewhere, and his wife, who really wanted me to do it. I just was finally fed up with universities, law firms. I left law firms that had made deals with the administration. I thought that was bad. I didn't think I had any voice anymore, really, so it didn't matter what I did. And there was a Peter, Paul, and Mary song, Where Have All the Flowers Gone?, which was an anti-Vietnam song. So I just wrote out, Where Have All the Leaders Gone? I liked that, and I just did it on instinct. 3 million people contacted me the next day.
Really?
3 million.
Why?
They just thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And somebody finally stood up, and all these celebrities. I don't know if I broke the dam. I don't know whether I began the snowball. I don't know whether it would have happened anyway. I don't know, because I have not talked to Bob about it, whether or not they would have put him back on just as they did. I have no idea. It wasn't that necessarily that Disney had done this, although it was my alma mater. It was a series of events, particularly with the law firms, and then the universities.
What did you think of Disney's settlement with President Trump?
Well, I didn't like any of that. I thought the CBS settlement was ridiculous. I think ABC settling, paying him $16 million, which somebody told me went directly to him, directly to Donald Trump. I don't know if that's true or not. I tried to think, what would have I done in that position?
Because you're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
I am sure there was a lot of conversation. I would like to think that I wouldn't have settled like CBS did, like law firms did, but maybe I would have. Maybe the taking away your funding or not letting you buy a company. It wasn't the money, because the $17 million for Disney is meaningless. But the image of it, CBS was worse, because CBS had 60 Minutes, had such a gold standard of news that I know they wanted to get, Sherry Redstone wanted to sell the company. Barry and I were actually looking at it. We made an offer.
Why didn't it work out?
Because Ellison has more money than anybody. I think he's the third richest man in the world. So you're not going to outbid them. But them settling to get that deal done, in the long run, maybe it made sense, but it was terrible for 60 Minutes.
I want to ask you about Disney today, and then just kind of the changing media landscape. First, what do you think of the state of the company today?
I think the company's in great shape. I think Bob has been an excellent CEO. I'm happy that he was the person that I recommended, that I got it through the board. He was not the board's first choice in the beginning. He ended up being unanimous choice. He came out of ABC. He was a president under me for a decade. He understands the company.
It has to make you quite proud that you got that right, because oftentimes you have somebody who's successfully run a company for a really long time, and the succession doesn't go as well.
Most of the time, succession doesn't go well.
Right.
Most of the time, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. So going to the outside is dangerous. If you have people on the inside that are capable, that's a better way to go. But Bob, his predecessor died. He became
Frank Wells.
Right. He became the number 2 in the company after a mistake, which we've all made. And he was great. He did all the stuff that Frank did and more. And he understood it, and he spent a decade with me and our design people in the parks, and he knew it. It was so obvious. So I think he did a good job.
You think Chapek was given enough time?
That was a marriage made in hell. That was
Why?
Bob and Chapek. It just was a mistake, Bob really wasn't ready to leave completely, and Chapek was going to prove that he was the boss, doing stupid things, not necessary things, separating the distribution from the creative and the movie business, all those things like that. Bob recognized it, couldn't help himself probably in noting it. Chapek was a mistake. I don't know if I hired him, but I certainly approved him to run home video. He did a great job at home video. He did, I think, a good job with the parks. But he just was the wrong choice. That's all.
I asked this from the lens of when you were hired to run Disney. Initially, they wanted you and Frank Wells to be kind of co-CEOs. The reports are that Disney's now considering a co-CEO post-Bob Iger structure. Apparently they've consulted Netflix because Netflix is a similar structure. But what's your view of that today?
Well, I don't know when you're going to air this, but it hasn't.
It's possible that a decision could have already been made when this airs. Yeah.
I just don't know when you're going to air this. But I want to make it a point that they haven't made a decision.
Right.
It is ridiculous. That is not to run the bakery. It doesn't work.
It is at Netflix, though, apparently.
Well, it's a completely different company. It's a technology company and an entertainment company. And it has been basically co-CEOs, with Reed Hastings being the founder and the guru, and Ted Sarandos. It's not applicable, and I still think it's a bad idea. I think it would be a really big mistake for Disney. Pick the person you think should be the CEO, and hopefully the second person will be number 2. And when Frank Wells and I were having that conversation, our shareholders wanted a CEO share. I think they wanted Co, and then they wanted Frank, and then I said no, and then Frank said Michael should be the CEO. It should be run from a creative point of view. I'll be happy to be number 2. And it was great. And I can't believe I said it, because I don't know if I meant it. I said I wouldn't, because I didn't want to stay at Paramount. I said I won't come unless I'm the CEO. I probably would have folded on that. But anyway, I did say it. And they believed it.
And the rest is history.
Right, so I would recommend them strongly. I'm not going to say anything if they do that, but because I want to point out again, they haven't done it, they haven't announced it, I would hope they don't do that.
The changing media landscape. You've said everybody in the industry is running around scared now all the time. How so?
They've always run around scared. Every decision is a big decision. If you make a movie for $300 million with marketing, you can really put your company in jeopardy forever. So the mistakes are gigantic. The successes are few. I was saved many times by one film that just turned everything around. Television, same thing. I've always thought, I looked at my job as like a manager of a baseball team. Every manager gets fired. So I thought, okay, I got this job. If it doesn't work, I'm gonna get fired. I'll get another job. I always told myself, just do it. These are temporary jobs. Eventually, you're going to fail. But do what you think is right, always along the line, always ethically. Stick to your thoughts. You talked about my father before. My father was maniacal about ethics.
Almost to his detriment, right?
Yes, to his detriment at times. But it was driven into me, and I've driven into my children.
What have you learned about the need to evolve and change with the times?
Well, you need to. Whether I did or not, enough is a question. You have to be prescient. You have to look to the future. You have to see that home video is coming to an end, or that streaming is, I mean, if I was Reed Hastings, Disney would be Netflix. You know, you have to, especially in the media, you have to reinvent. You constantly reinvent. Somebody else reinvents for you. And you're afraid, you try to protect your assets. So you want to protect home video, which is making all this money. You don't want to do something that's going to kill home video. And what do? You kill yourself by trying to save yourself.
Take home video as example. I mean, people forget that home video was a tough decision to make in the first place, and you, to your credit,
nobody wanted to do home video. When we sold in a shrink wrap Fantasia and made $100 million in a week, and I questioned how many of those shrink wraps were really opened, I called Lillian Disney, Walt's widow, and say, it's now 52 years later, we just broke even on Fantasia. And she said, I always hated that film. Walt loved it. She's hysterical. I had to talk the Disney family into doing Fantasia. We started off with Pinocchio. Nobody wanted, we were putting out films, one animated film making $3 or $4 million a year. All of a sudden we're putting out Pinocchio making $80 million in 2 weeks. But nobody wanted to do it. So yes, between Frank and me, we saw that. And we saw ESPN when we bought what it was going to be. I don't know, I could have bought the Mighty Ducks. Disney wanted me to buy the Mighty Ducks when I left, and I thought that was a conflict. And it was $50 million, and it's now $3 billion or $4 billion, whatever it is. So I didn't see that coming. Some people see better than I do.
The theater business. There were reports that, for moviegoers, 25% of moviegoers go to the theater every other month. Pre-pandemic, that was 40%. What do you seize the state of that business?
Pre-television, it was every week. There are only 120 million people in the country. 80 million people went every week to a movie. So there's a definition of the change. The only thing I don't like about it is that the movies that do well in the theaters are the big technical extravaganzas. And the small independent films from Europe or from the US, Miramax type films, they really only survive on Amazon or Apple or Netflix. So it's hard. It's not a business that I would go into today.
You think it survives?
I don't know. No, probably not. Not in the long. I mean, it'll survive for another 20 years, but at some point, the home is more convenient.
How do you see AI impacting media?
I understand it for instance, in our development from 2D animation to computer generation. I understand it in the ways that it's been written about. I certainly understand it in healthcare, how it's now being used. Do I think it's ever going to write an Academy Award-winning movie? No. Because I think the movies and the television shows that really succeed are where the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. Something that's totally original, that hasn't been done before, and I just don't know. I mean, I probably will live to regret this. I just don't know whether a computer can match the creative brain for the future. I know that the writers and producers are very nervous about that. Look, let's say you have a pilot of a show, Happy Days or All in the Family or whatever, and you say to AI, give me 10 episodes in the same mold and the same characters as this pilot. And they'll spit out 10 episodes in a row. I don't know. Maybe that works.
I emailed with Henry Winkler about you the other night, actually. I mentioned the hitchhiking story that you told in your book. Last question about the state of the media industry before moving on. You were one of the early investors in Netflix. I'd imagine you did quite well there. But how do you see what's the conclusion to the streaming wars and future consolidation that still needs to take place in your mind?
I think I invested in Netflix because I had so much respect for Ted Sarandos. Here's a guy that went to Netflix and his job was buying existing motion pictures from us and others to be on Netflix. Fine, and that's a commodity. You know the box office, you know who's in it. It's all about whatever you pay, all that. But what he did, again, another surprise creative executive, he actually made films, approved films to be made, television shows, which changed the whole world of Netflix. And I saw that, and Andy Redmond and I, people who were here, said we should invest in Netflix early. Now everybody has kind of copied the Netflix thing, and they're hiring executives that were used to work in other branches. But he's impressive, I think.
What do you think in terms of how this all plays out in remaining consolidation that has to take place?
You mean like Paramount buying Warner Brothers, that kind of thing?
Sure.
You know what it is? It's a merry-go-round. If they buy Warner Brothers, 3 years they'll spin off this one and they'll buy that one. It's been a merry-go-round since 1948. You know, when they broke up the Paramount decree, when they broke up Paramount Pictures with the Paramount Theaters, and then Paramount Theaters merged with ABC, and I mean, every company has gone through this. When we did a 100-year bond at Disney, there were only 3 companies in the world, or maybe in the US, that had been around for 100 years. So yes, there'll be a lot of change. It'll still be who was the best ideas. The technology, however, I suspect the idea of home entertainment in some form is here forever.
When you became CEO of the Walt Disney Company, stock price was $1.24, and it was $23.80 when you left 21 years later. So you can make the strong argument that outside of Walt himself, no single person had a more consequential impact on the company than you. But how do you look back on those last couple of years, that last period now?
Well, there was change going on. I was stubborn. I did not want to buy Pixar for a price that I thought was crazy. It wasn't as depressing as the media made it. We were still doing very well. We were still a great company. I had decided that we couldn't lose any more money with Roy Disney making movies, so I stopped that. Probably a bad political decision, but the right decision. I tried and succeeded in getting rid of Harvey Weinstein.
Which was unpopular with the board at that time.
No, they went wild about Harvey, and he was losing money. No, that wasn't. The only thing unpopular, well, Harvey and Steve and Roy become adversaries to the CEO. Well, one had the name of Disney. I didn't. One was Steve Jobs, an American one of a kind, and the other was a despicable man who was loved by the media for a long time because of the movies he made. And I made the judgment call, probably right, but not politically smart, that I was not going to put up with it. So that was unpleasant. But I was ready. I had 21 years at Disney, having every weekend 20 scripts by my bed that I hadn't read, and thousands of emails, and international, building a park in Shanghai, and having just built a park in Hong Kong, and doing the Animal Kingdom, doing a second park in Paris. I was ready to move here, I was ready to move to the one street in Los Angeles that felt like New York. I was ready to not have 20 unread scripts. I was ready to actually own myself content. I don't want to go through it, but we were the first ones to start short form with a company called Vugaru. When the bandwidth expanded, then it went into longer form like BoJack Horseman, bought a soccer team that I owned. My kids were now adults, and I certainly didn't leave to spend more time with my family because I already spent all my time with my family. So that's all what people say.
Regardless how talented an executive might be, does it almost not matter who it is at some point when one person's running it for that long, it's time for a change?
I think change is good in management because it also creates opportunity to go in new directions. You can't just stay in the old directions. I'm not wild about the fact that it is so expensive now to go to Disneyland or Walt Disney World. I'm not wild about the fact that it's harder than ever to have everybody be a VIP at a Disney park because they're selling certain things. The things that I would do differently, but I don't think I would run it as well as Bob is running it.
An interview with Mike Ovitz literally came out yesterday, where he said he still thinks about that period and what happened. Do you think you and him, or you and Katzenberg, ever reconnect?
Well, you're asking a question that it's a completely different situation. Michael Ovitz was the wrong person for that job from day one. It just was a mistake. He was a great agent. He had aspirations, and it was just an elephant in a china shop from day one. Jeffrey was a different situation in that Frank had made a deal that he never told me about. I had made a deal that I thought was, and I was stubborn, and I said, Jeffrey, you have to live with this deal. His conversations with Jeffrey were very different than my conversations with Jeffrey, and I did not quite know that.
Meaning he could have told Jeffrey that the job's his when he leaves?
Never that. It was all about financials. Oh no, it was never that.
Okay.
And Roy Disney never would have had that. The life of a movie was like a decade. So when you made a deal with an executive that got a continuing interest, you ended it at a decade. Well, that all changed with streaming and international and all the rest of it. I thought that was still the deal. And I was advised not to let the lawsuit happen, and it settled, and I was stubborn. And so, but Jeffrey was both Michael Ovitz, excellent executive as an agent, and Jeffrey, excellent corporate executive. So they both served their companies and me great.
What would you say for you personally was the kind of single hardest moment, and what you learned about yourself in getting through it?
I don't know, every week there was a hard moment. I can't think of any one single hardest moment. Every weekend we're getting the grosses, opening up a theme park, our CFO left 2 weeks before our annual meeting, all those kinds of things. I think the hardest moment was dealing with Harvey Weinstein.
Really?
Yeah, because he lied about everything. How do you deal with somebody who never tells the truth?
And you learned what getting to the other side of that?
Well, I never thought about what I learned, but I think I would not make a deal because I got a good cheap deal, $70 million to buy Miramax, if I thought that I'm bringing a wolf into the henhouse.
Health. Your dad had, I think, quadruple bypass surgery at 65. How did that impact you?
Well, it was another deal to deal with. It was another, he was in Palm Springs. He had chest pains. We had to get to Cedars. There was no room in the ICU. I had to call a board member of Cedars and see if they could help me get him in. He insisted on stopping 2 miles from Cedars because he didn't want to, he had another bathroom. I kept saying to him, they've got a lot of bathrooms at Cedars. No, I'm going to stop. I met the doctor who was heavy, big fat fingers. I thought, how is this guy, Dr. Matloff, he was fantastic. How is he going to operate? What are those fingers going to do like? I think he went in for the operation and the power went off and he woke up and all that happened is he had a haircut, as I remember. So it was just it was process, dealing with it. And then he was fine.
What changes did you make after you had it yourself?
None. I was in Sun Valley. I thought I was having a heart attack the night before. I went to they didn't have a hospital. I went to whatever it was, a little infirmary. The guy did an EKG, said, I recognize who you are, and I'm telling you, you have no problem. The next morning, I called my secretary and said, do not, when you get the bill, pay it. I don't want it to go through personnel department. She rightly so called my doctor. He called me and said, you got to go to Cedars and do a stress test. I know, I'm fine. I flew back from Sun Valley a day early. I watched the pilot of ER on the plane, wishing it was ABC, not NBC's pilot. I drove myself, my wife drove home. There was no issue. I got on the treadmill. They stopped it after a minute. The next thing I knew, I was on morphine. It was Friday night before the finals of the World Cup. As I'm being wheeled in, I said to my wife, to Jane, who was the doctor? She said, Dr. Trento. I said, well, where's he from? She said, Tijuana. I thought, well, if she can make a joke about that, I guess I'm all right. I made an arrangement with him, and I can't remember how I did it, but if I lived, he's Italian, Italy was playing somebody at the Rose Bowl. I said, if I live, you have my tickets. If I die, you don't have them. And I woke up the next morning, and that was that. I felt, I stopped eating a lot of beef. I changed my diet, and I exercised every day, but I never thought I was sick.
How did viral meningitis nearly kill you?
Well, that's when I was in high school. I don't know. I got viral meningitis my junior year, my senior year. I was supposed to be in the Caine Mutiny as an actor. I couldn't do it.
And recovered, and that's that.
Yeah.
And the health today is good?
Yeah.
An average day today for you entails what?
Every day is different. Every day is definitely conversations about television series. We have a very good group here. We have a lot of animation. We really, I think, are leading in animation for the Netflix and others. I mean, good animation. I don't know, maybe 20 different, I have an idea a minute, very hard. It's not so easy to sell anymore.
Really? Why?
Well, I think I don't walk in the room because I remind them of somebody who's their great-grandfather. So I don't do that, because when I was a buyer at 50 and a 75-year-old person would come in, I know I was biased. I just know it. So I don't want to remind them. So I have and I don't know, my granddaughter is a equestrian in a place called Wellington, Florida. It's an unbelievable environment. It's upstairs, downstairs, it's mothers and having affairs with trainers, it's nubile girls running all over the place, it's everything. And I've been trying to sell that television series now for 3 years. I'm gonna sell it, but it's not easy. So every day is trying to do something. It's a lot of conversations about football, soccer. I don't know, arranging Thanksgiving, going family. Every day is different. What it isn't is every day having somebody broken their ankle at Walt Disney World or you know, some crisis.
Last one for you. If you were writing your memoir today, what would you add to it?
Well, I don't know if I'd even write a memoir. I did write one with Tony Schwartz, which I hate. In hindsight, I don't know. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have done it that early.
Jane told you not to.
That I don't remember. Probably, but I don't remember that. But I probably wouldn't do that. I'd say Barry's memoir was fantastic. I don't have that kind of a story. I just think it'd be boring. I mean, I'm sick of all these memoirs. Everybody has a memoir, so I don't think I'd do a memoir. I do have 2 novels that I'm trying to get published. So we'll see what happens.
And you've written a slew of books.
I've written not fiction. Mm-hmm. These are 2 fiction books, which I have no idea.
But you enjoy it.
I do enjoy it. I said to Matt, who runs public relations, that you better read this because I think I'm in trouble.
Well, I know this has been a long time coming. We chatted on stage for Toyota in Vancouver back in 2019. And
Is that what it was?
I've been after you ever since. Really a treat. Thank you for making the time. Well, very much appreciate it.
This was fun and interesting.